Kevin, now we are here in your beloved nature. And we are in a wood. It's even called a peace wood in Denmark.
Okay.
You're not allowed to remove it.
Okay.
And we are here with some huge trees. And in a sense, you at some time you connected to nature. So what is it? What does it give you, this nature?
Oh man, it's a tremendous sense of wonder. I mean, we just stand here.
Yeah.
And you look at the trees that go along down here. You often hear people talk about the woods as a cathedral of nature, and I find that a tremendously evocative phrase. One of the beauties of this place is just the age of it. Each of these trees has got their own history, their own story, and they grew from next to nothing. You know, Jesus uses parables about the seeds growing up and producing fruit. Yeah. There's an intimate connection there about how beautiful things can grow out of small things. And there's a spiritual lesson in that as well, I find. It's hard to put words to it, but it's more of a feeling.
It's a sense of awe and hope and life.
Yeah, and trees in particular are particularly expressive of the changing seasons, the way they burst into life in spring, the freshness of the new leaves, which we're getting now in early summer. And then in the next couple of months that colour will darken. And then during the autumn, these beautiful beech trees here, that big explosion of culture. Oh. And then when you get to the middle of December and January, it's absolutely bare to the point where when you look at the tree in winter, you think, how could there ever be anything living there? And then the cycle begins again. I just find that tremendously enriching to sense and feel that.
It's the story of life.
And then each tree is like a city in itself, supporting so many insects and bird life, and the seeds they produce become food for other creatures, and insects munching on the leaves, the roots that go deep into the soil and create another ecosystem on their own. Every tree is like a world entire just by itself.
Yes.
And when you have them all together like this, I have a tremendous feeling of life bursting out and expressing itself, and all these. And every tree is completely unique. You know, the shape of the branches, everything about it.
Oh, it's wonderful.
That is just you just soak it in here. You feel like you're in holy ground when you're on your own and you become aware of the life and the beauty around you.
Yeah.
It's just noticing it
and
seeing it.
It's becoming alive when you tell about it. Velkommen til en ny episode af en Pilgrimspræsts dagbog. Og det her er i virkeligheden også lidt en fortsættelse af Kevin McLaughlins historie. Han taler på engelsk, eller Irish. Og i første episode der var vi inde omkring, kan man sige, opvækst og overgangen fra Irland til England, til Manchester, til London, og hans vej ind i den katolske, ikke den katolske kirke, men i hvert fald ind i til at blive katolsk præst, og hans, kan man sige, formationsrejse. Det er ikke bare lige at rejse til Norge, til København eller Aarhus. Der er meget mere vægt, ikke bare på informationen og viden, men også på dannelsen og blive til i et samspil med andre og forankret, kan man sige, også i indersiden af sig selv. Og så nu tager vi den op igen her, så welcome back, Kevin.
Peter.
And now you are back from Zambia. Was it Zambia? And you are back in London, and So I wondered this formational journey. It seems like you are paddling. You're not just over the earth. You have to sweat and walk and fight and struggle and gain more knowledge. Your inner professor is always looking out, but not only for information, but also integrating, could you say, the learning from the created world in a sense, in all its splendor. So what happens when you came back and had to re-entry and
Well, I came back. I actually came back to Dublin, and my boss at that time, the provincial, who kind of is the leader of the congregation, he said, "Go home for a week." And I went home for a week. At Christmas time, came back, and he says, "We'd like you to go to Liverpool to work at a parish." And this was the year that I was actually ordained a priest, so that was normal practice, that you're actually ordained when you're inserted into a parish. So can you be there whenever you can? So I was there the next day.
yeah.
Basically, I turn up and join the community, and what do I do here? So the parish was St. Teresa's in Norris Green, in a suburb of Liverpool, a poor area, a lot of drugs and unemployment, but a hardcore Christian community in the middle of this. It's not a pretty place. It's an enormous public housing estate, and the church right in the middle of it. And Liverpool, within England, has a very distinctive culture and identity, which they're very proud of. Very working class, very militant, very emotional kind of people. That was a challenge to suddenly find myself in an urban environment again, dealing with a lot of family issues, poverty again, and all the various disasters that can happen in people's lives. And to just grow into that community was a challenge. When I was actually ordained a priest, we had the right to ask for a posting to any mission in the world, and I asked to be posted to Brazil because that was the mission of my Irish community, was to Brazil. I was actually on loan to an American mission in Zambia, and if I'd gone back there I would have left my Irish community and become under the Americans. And I didn't want that, because it was the Irish that had supported me all through my studies, and I felt I owed them. So this was a kind of compromise. So when I was beginning in Liverpool, I was also had Brazil in my mind. So I went to Brazil for about 3 months, a kind of fact-finding mission. When I visited our missions in Rio and Goiânia, and in Mato Grosso do Sul, which is cowboy country in the south of Brazil. And I spent some time in each of these places and getting to know the men that were out there. And then I came back to get the paperwork organized, and disaster happened. The guy that I was going to live and work with in Goiânia had actually left the priesthood and married a local Brazilian woman. And that immediately kind of gave me the excuse not to go. And I was actually quite glad, because Brazil was certainly not Africa. The language was much easier, and I could see how, it's a beautiful country and lots of possibilities. But I found the poverty quite overwhelming. In Africa, basically, everybody was poor. And everybody was in the same boat. But in Brazil, people clearly were not. And there was a huge amount of social injustice, which I found very, very difficult. In Rio in particular, some of in the favelas, the people were struggling to get by, and yet literally on the other side of the street you'd have millionaires living. And that contrast I found very, very challenging. And I know that some of our men also suffered personally from, for example, their involvement in the trade union movement and trying to organize agricultural workers. Is that our advantage of religious is that we didn't have families, we didn't have local connections, so we were like outsiders coming in, which enabled us to do that. But what happened was that people who worked with the priests were being threatened physically. Some of them were killed. And it was a horrible situation. And I'm thinking, do I really want to do this? In a way, I was looking to replicate the African experience, but Brazil was just totally other world.
Mm-hmm. You had to have some paradigm shift once again.
Yeah, and I thought, by that time I was getting settled in Liverpool, so I thought, let's just wait and see. Let's just do my time in Liverpool. So I ended up being in Liverpool, working in a parish for 4 years and immersed in parish life, schools, hospitals, funerals, baptisms, sacramental preparation, living in community, and just being a part of life in the area of Liverpool where we were living.
So you were like a band of brothers. You were living in
There was
this.
three of us, three priests.
Three priests living
in
in like this bonus family. So we had that before the Reformation, also in Denmark, in the bigger cities. And after that, the priests, were supposed to marry and move, living with the family. But this was all this. There's not much, could you say, glory. It's hard work. It's you have to invest yourself. It's overwhelming, I guess, many times too much. Would you say challenge, or you cannot solve everything, and you're in the midst of it. And How is it? How was it for you to be in this? Could you say in this way of life and work and?
Well, I ended up. I had 12 years in parish ministry. From Liverpool, I went to London, and then I was appointed a parish priest, which in Catholic churches you're the boss of a parish in Dublin. All of them basically working class areas, heavily populated, long history of church in these places. And you're involved in just the basic business of people's lives, from sickness, education, death, marriages, separations, generational issues, loneliness, sudden disasters in life, or unemployment, poverty, drug addiction was always a factor. It was tremendously energizing when you're able to do something. It was a tremendous privilege to have that special access into people's lives at moments of transformation. I was also younger and full of energy and full of idealism, and I fed off that. There's a sense in which the work itself becomes the reward, and you also build up a certain expertise, a certain ability to deal with situations, the experience of knowing what works in this situation, of being able to match scripture, for example, and prayer, how to conduct yourself. At funerals, for instance, because there's huge differences between the Irish and the English, that sort of thing. It's knowledge that you can only acquire by experience. It's not book knowledge. And knowing what to do, where the priorities are. And within the church, you have the liturgical year, which adds a certain structure in things. Certain things happen the same time every year. Christmas and the lead up to Advent, Ash Wednesday, Lent, Easter, Pentecost, the school year as well is on top of that. So all of that creates a structure there's a universal quality about it, but the expression of it varies according to the local culture. So it really wasn't a time for a lot of reflection. It was a doing time, and I'm really glad for that period, because it immersed me in the lives of many different people, from, and particularly in London, in Kilburn, where I was back in the area where I used to live as an accountant, and amazingly diverse population from everywhere. You hear every language in Kilburn High Road. And the church there is a real centre of the community, a real focus of bringing people together, and such it's a tremendous loneliness, and there's a really high population in this part of London, as there is in all of London, but so many people have no way of getting to know each other. And I remember my own experience of working as an accountant, how difficult it was to have a social life when you don't really when you haven't the time or the energy or the places to meet other people. How important the church is in creating community again, bringing people together. So those were good years, but I'm glad I'm not doing it anymore.
It had its time. Yes, and it's very much through serving the poor, this social edge to it. It's not so much some power healing evangelist type stage type thing. It's more emerged into this real life where there are no could you say fixed solution. You cannot.
Yeah, I mean it's very much the way of congregation, the Oblates, that I was a part of.
Yeah.
We live in community personally, and our focus is to those that the church touches least. And also, as religious, we're living in vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, which is a whole worldview of attitude towards people, towards things, and our commitment to prayer as well. So we're not individuals trying to do the best for ourselves. We're part of a community trying to serve those around us. And we model ourselves as much as we can on the life of Jesus Christ, who himself was poor, was chaste, was obedient to his Father. And we try and, well, what does that mean here in this situation? So the life is one of service, but it's also one of deepening one's own personal identification and with Jesus himself, the internal growth. Temptation is to get into activity and not to be reflecting on it, and that's always the danger with any kind of Christian mission.
Yeah, so
the activity takes over.
So you would have both. You have to have the root system and the visible and the invisible together. And of course the visible is putting yourself in front of you all the time.
Yeah.
So you were but you had this strength of one another to encourage one another to have this.
That's the ideal. That's the ideal. Religious life is full of ideals, which we don't always live up to. People are human, and I suppose you learn to kind of tolerate but understand people's weaknesses. And I had my own problems. I had a big problem with drink, for instance. I had a huge part of being young was working with the homeless. Is I spent a lot of time in the streets and in pubs and meeting people. I was one of my jobs when I was working in the hostel in London was that's where I was a contact person for young people. Word of mouth. You want a place to stay? Go and see that guy over there. And I loved that kind of the social life around the pub, and it became a big part of my life because it was one of my ways of dealing with the stress and high energy. But I became an alcoholic, and I had to deal with that, which was very painful. Admitting that I was an alcoholic, thank God I was part of a really good community who endured me, but then were there for me when I kind of had to put my hands up and say, I can't do this anymore. And that was also a big influence on my spiritual life as well. It gave me an ability to look at myself with an honesty I don't think I had the maturity to do before, to confront the demons within inside myself, and the path back to sobriety again. I haven't had a drink now in 13, 14 years, and it's like I was reborn. It's the only way I can describe that.
So here again, it's like a new rite of passage. It's like going into this, could you say, inner underworld. It's not Zambia, but it's your own soul and heart and all these deprived areas and places, and say hello and try to meet and integrate. And again, the support for this journey was in your the fellowship. And so when you what helped you, if we say, well, you were trying to find some comfort or release by drinking, and I guess that's part of the Western culture very much all over the place, and still is, of course. And when you didn't have access, could you say, to that release, how did you come back? How did you find way to be comforted? Have you found a more real comfort, or instead of this more false comfort?
Yeah, and I think it was a chance for me really to re-evaluate a lot of things. But finding balance in life, but recognizing my temptations and finding other ways to deal with that. So one thing I did was I started taking up photography. That was the time when I'd always been interested in it, but this was the time I began to take it seriously.
Yeah.
And that in turn gave me the motivation to get out up the mountains in Dublin, and because I love landscapes, and with the camera it sort of gives you a little added purpose to being there, to capture the moment. So that was the beginning of that kind of passion, which has stayed with me since.
Yes. So you out in the landscape and looking. It's beauty, isn't it, or it's the mysticism, or what would you say is
so much
capturing you?
It's so much. Because in Dublin, and Glendalough is near Dublin, as you know, which is St. Kevin, my namesake. It's a very beautiful place. So the landscape has always spoken to me. It's not just the surface beauty of it, but it's the shape of it. It's the story it tells of the land going back through the ice ages and how it was shaped by humans. The old field systems, the tumble down stone cottages that you find, the natural life in the landscapes, the insects, butterflies, all of that was something I find endlessly beautiful, fascinating, and I wanted to find out more about it.
Yes.
I think coming back to sobriety reawakened a lot of my senses, and realizing that made it much easier to stay away from alcohol.
Yeah. So it's like this. We in Denmark we have some interest in this Celtic in heritage, and it's like you, and part of that is all this nature mysticism, and in a sense you revisited nature and all the living and stuff, and connected somehow to it.
It was certainly a big part of my way to healing.
Yes.
And it was strange also because there's a sort of sense of a circle coming around, because when I was younger I grew up in the countryside.
Yes.
And mountainous, fishing and working in the farms during the summer and bringing in the hay and gathering the spuds in the autumn. So that was a world that seemed it's a long time ago in a different place, but that sense was coming back to me.
Yes.
Again. And
it's interesting. Because we say in the West here we develop a dependence culture in a sense. We are more and more swallowed by could you say stuff and drink and things and alienated from. We have this nature deficit disorder, and we are confused and cannot find our way, and then of course we are captured by all these false comfort stuff. And your road, I find it very interesting that it was coming back to where you came from and always has been a part of, but not had realized you were connected to. Yeah.
And I was very lucky at that point, into my healing again. I kind of knew inside myself I couldn't go back to what I had been doing. I needed something different. And within the community allowed me to go off to do a master's in ecology and religion. And for 3 years I had a ball.
Yes.
It took me everywhere.
Isn't it interesting that your inner professor, he always wants the theoretical part also to be there. To understand. You have to experience, you have to be formed in it, but you also want to understand it. And they go together. Sometimes one is a little in front of the others, as you say, and then you have digested from coming back and all that. So it's very interesting that you have, could you say, followed through on your journey, even the painful parts and the challenging parts. Yeah. So I think we'll need to make a third because we haven't reached yet. Now you had this new platform, or this studying, and you got this master's in ecology and was it
ecology and religion?
Ecology and religion, and I find this is really important. Also to what it did to you and how you now are in the world with this new. You've captured some new knowledge and stuff. So we will have to make a third investigation because you haven't reached Denmark yet.
Okay.
I have this idea that Denmark was Christian from the West. That before we came from South with the Catholic Church, we had the connection with the Vikings and the Celtic population, and also like in Norway, we had a Christian Celtic population. And sometimes I think if we cannot get healed with too much, could you say, organized and structured religion, some of this journey could be maybe revisiting our Celtic roots and inspirations like you did. And so we'll need to hear more about it. So I'll switch on off from here. Så tak at I hørte med her til den her fascinerende rejse af Kevin McLaughlin og hans vej igennem den katolske kirke, og som bruger i oblatordenen og som præst og udsendt til Zambia og ind i hans arbejde for de fattige og hans vej igennem det. og igennem livet. Vi vender tilbage med en tredje episode, og I kan se hjemmesiden, han arbejder på Pilgrimshuset i Maribo, så der kommer linken her nedenfor. Og også på Flickr, hvis I kigger på Kevin McLaughlin, og hvordan han forbandt sig igen med naturen og mysteriet og skønheden og landskaberne og detaljerne og de store linjer og hele den helbredelse, der var ved at komme tilbage, så at sige, i den første bibel, i skaberværket. Så tak, at I ser med, hører med, og også velkommen til at kigge med på den tredje episode.
I mean, you talked to me about my professor's side and the need for understanding.
Yeah.
If I've learned anything in life, it's acceptance is far more important than understanding.
Oh.
So when I'm here, I just accept the beauty.
So the professor gives away to awe and the beauty. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, we understand so much about the world, but we see so little of it. Just to notice and let it speak to you.